a buck and book saves $1,000 in stupid. This is a Smith & Wesson DA-45, a 1917 Army gun, and it has straight through drilled cylinders on it. So if you drop around a 45 in it, they go all the way down to the bottom. The owner of this particular weapon found a new old stock cylinder that has the step chambers in it for 45 ACP. So in this particular dive here, we're going to talk about a lot of things Smith & Wesson, because we're going to have to go in and retime all this and try to come up with a way that we can still use this cylinder on this gun. We can use this cylinder and it looks like it belongs here. And it'll all be in time, and hopefully it'll be less dangerous to stand next to this gun than in front of it. Down the rabbit hole, shall we? Why are we even doing this? The 45 automatic Colt pistol cartridge is rimless. It's designed to headspace on its case mouth. So if you don't have a case mouth in it, it'll just fall all the way in, and it's pretty obvious that that won't work. I'm not the first guy to show that. So when they adopted the 45 ACP to run in these revolvers, they came up with these things called moon clips. Now originally they're halfway. I like the full 6s. The moon clip allows this to be grabbed by the star and extracted. It's kind of like a portable speed loader. Well, later on, I'm assuming they came up with this where they actually cut the hard chamber inside this revolver cylinder, just like you have a hard chamber inside of a 45 Colt. The 1911 has this bottom on it where it will stop. Okay, so in this particular case, the star is still not going to pick it up, but you can load this round in it and run it. There is a later evolution of this round that actually has a rim on it called a 45 auto rim, and for the life of me, I could not find one in the shop here today. What this gentleman would like to be able to do is run the stop cylinder. Seriously, go to the See an Arsenal episode, because Otheus explains it way better than I will. I'm looking at the exterior finish on this particular gun, and it's been buffed a little bit, and it's been re-blued. So while we have this thing apart, we're going to do a full conservation on it just because we can. We would have to take it apart anyway in order to work on it, so we'll just go ahead and take it apart. So we'll just take the grips off it here. That's step one. Poke through, and that should pop our grips off. Okay, it didn't. So I'm going to go to a rawhide hammer and just persuade that up a little bit. See how that kind of popped up? And you just very gently. And you're about to see that again because we use the mass of the part against itself. Okay, there we go. Grip is off, and then we can come through and just tap that off there. Good. Second step is we're going to take these frame screws apart. And again, having a screwdriver that fits exactly really helps. This particular screw is the one that holds the cylinder in. So let me just show you this. This will come up. Okay. This particular screw has a little nubbins on the bottom of it. And what it does, this nubbins rides in this groove right here. Let me get my fingers out of the way here. That nubbins rides in the groove and it holds the cylinder in, okay? So this is a whole separate kettle of fish that's going to get its own take. That's going to go over there. I want to tear the rest of the gun down so that we can go ahead and take a look at what's going on. This is an oldie but a goodie. Okay, just nice and gentle. If you're forcing anything on a Smith, you're doing something wrong. Especially one of the ones that are this old, because the build quality on these things is crazy good. Okay. Get that out. And I have not backed the strain screw off yet because I want to show you something when I get it apart here. All right. Okay, that's off. Now, this is the point where everybody's prying, jackhammering, doing whatever. To get a Smith & Wesson frame off, you don't hold your thumb on it, but you hold it right here. So that's touching and that's slightly off. And then you hit the handle down here. And it'll pop the side plate off. No prizing. Your thumb is keeping it from flying across the room. And now you've exposed the internals to this. All right. There's a reason why I didn't want to back the strain screw off. Smith & Wessons have a peculiarity. This part here that's moving, that's me using that. So I'm going to get that interlock out of the way to allow us to cock the hammer, you see. All right. So we move that interlock out of the way. And what I want to show you is how close the rebound comes to that mainspring right there. It's very, very close right there, right? If you were to back this strain screw off, and what I'm doing is a no-no, but like make the trigger pull lighter by backing the strain screw off, all kinds of weird things happen inside this gun. And the big one is the mainspring hits the rebound right there and makes it bend to all kinds of weird angles. Don't do that. The strain screw should be all the way down all the time on all Smith & Wessons. Okay. The only time a Smith & Wesson trigger is screwed up is if somebody went in there and screwed it up. Seriously. Any Smith & Wesson made before World War II is especially, that's true. Now we take that strain all the way off and that spring will come out. And then we can take the strain screw all the way out here. Now, I've done this before in different videos. We just did, Bruno had some Spanish copy of one of these things in a rust bluing video. And it looked like a Smith, but it wasn't no damn Smith. I want to tell you what. At this point in the game is typically where I get the rebound out of the way. This rebound stud right here is under a tremendous amount of tension. So you have to make sure that no matter what you do not put that rebound stud in there. Put your finger, I got to get in front of you here. Put your finger right there and just let that spring pop into your fingertip. And it will come. Now, on some of these things, that rebound spring, listen to me, is pretty epic. And it will leave. It will go across the room. So we'll take the rebound out. And once we've done that, we have almost all of the tension off of everything. We will pop this interlock back and lift the hammer out. You don't really need to take out the double action pawl for just a cleaning. All we're going to do on this thing is conserve the frame while we have it apart. I conserve everything now. I think it's prudent to do that. All right, and in this particular case here, we can come up and lift the entire trigger free. Now, I did a Model 29 episode on a Smith & Wesson, and we had popped that stud, had broken off right there. Let me get this lined up here so we can see it. There it is right there. That stud right there had broken off, and we don't want to side load any of these studs. They're supported. That stud is supported by that boss. This stud is supported by this boss, and that stud there is supported by that boss this way. So they're supposed to be supported by both sides. You gotta be very careful what you do. They're not weak, they're not fragile. Why tempt them? All right, now this is the bolt, and this is spring loaded. And it's spring loaded by this screw. Right, hang on, let me get it. There it is, right there. That screw right there is how it's spring loaded. I'm just gonna go ahead and pop that loose. It should not be under a tremendous amount of tension. However, there is a spring in there. Come to pop up. There is a spring pushing on a plunger. There's like 4 pieces in this hole. Okay, we'll go back in there and get that here in a minute. But for right now, we can take the bolt down below and lift it clear. Again, I'm at kind of a weird angle here because I'm trying to show you what I'm doing. No force here. I should just turn it upside down and shake it, shouldn't I? Yeah, I think that's what I'm going to wind up doing. Just going to turn this upside down and drop it out on the ground like that, and then... Okay. There is a spring, there is a plunger, and that spring and that plunger are pushing up on the bottom of this, causing it to rotate. There are lots of little EV pieces, but if you think that spring is small, wait till you see the next one. All right. There is a spring and a plunger underneath this screwdriver right here that's pushing forward on this. So when we pull that out, we have to be very, very mindful of the fact that there's a plunger in there attempting to launch itself across the room. Let's get sit down in there. Oh yeah, there's some yak underneath this. There's some dirt under here. That comes off. This comes off. Now this, we're going to lift out. There's two different schools of thought on this, and in this particular one, it's going to want to come out this way. Hang on a minute. I'll get my finger out of here in a minute. There we go. We have to let this slide up. Let's get this up here. Oddball angle. Typically, on some of these Smiths, you can get away with popping this up this way, but I'm not going to be able to. Okay, so you see how this is coming up right here? Got to have our finger back here like this, and we're going to trap this energy here. There's the plunger. You see it pop up? I know I had to reach in front of you, but I don't want to fly this. I don't want to fly this part across the room. Now that is an eeny-weeny spring right there. And I'll give you a number 2 pencil for a size comparison. Now I have an entire tray of these things labeled Itsy Bitsy Springs, but you may not have a tray of Itsy Bitsy Springs. So I don't know, lately there's been a meme floating around the internet of all the D10 pins out of AR-15s, and it looks like this cloud. NORAD's tracking every one of them, boys and girls. That's essentially the entire teardown of this frame. It's almost all out of here. There's a couple of more things we would want to get. That pin has to be driven. There's a spring-loaded cassette in here. And if you really had to, you could drive that pin and drop this out, and then you're all the way done. Resist the temptation to ever attempt to take these out, even if they look like they have spring-loaded bosses, because, well, you know, if that's how you want to screw it up. All right, we might get lucky here, but the way this goes, and let me get my fingers out of the way. There's a set of flutes in there, and that presses down, and then this stop right here keeps the cylinder from coming off. That little stop is the only thing keeping that cylinder from falling out the back. Now we can shut this, and it'll lock in, revealing the fact that the cylinder is free to move. That rod's not going around like this. All right, this gun was very well taken care of. And we have a very slight amount of forward and back clearance. You don't want to zero any of these things all the way out or else they won't work. Now without the thumb piece on it, the only way to get this thing open is I'm going to come in from behind right inside that hole, and I'm going to pop that locking plunger open. All right, now the locking plunger does this. This is the lock right here, and it's a spring-loaded plunger, and when it's pushed all the way down, it comes up flush on that end. See how it's flush? That will then pop the lock on the other end. It'll pop the outboard lock, then the inboard lock will be flush, and this thing can come open. All right. The early Smiths had regular righty-tighty, lefty-loosey cylinders. There are Smiths out there that have a groove cut right where the end of my fingernail is, and that's telling you that they're right-handed. You're going to be gentle here, and I'm going to put a couple of cartridges in the back end of this thing to support the star while I'm doing it. And we're just going to rotate, and you bump it back and forth a little bit, and usually it'll give way and come right on out. Do not, this is like 7,000 threads per inch in here. Do not gorilla this thing. You run it down till the torque winds up, you give it a little snick, and you're there, all right? So we'll go ahead and pull those out. But you want to make sure you support the star. Do not make this star do any torsional work. Just throwing that out there. All right. Also, we're going to know how smooth this thing slides back down onto the star here, okay? It's very smooth. And our replacement cylinder, the star that came with it, is not quite that smooth, so we're going to have to do a little bit of work here, all right? So we'll continue to take this out. I'm going to just very gently tighten that up in there like that. We'll bring this out, and I don't want this to come apart on me. There's 2 springs in here. Okay. That spring and that spring, and they work on this collar deal like this. So one spring is working over the outside of the other one. This is the one that's pushing the ejector out. And this is the spring that's moving this pin back and forth, the locking spring. So you got to remember those two. And the fact that they ride over the top of each other. And this is where the fun's done. This is where all the work is done right here. So that has to be able to spin inside of that, and the cylinder spins over the outside of it. So one of the keys, and I'm not doing a whole revolver smithing class here, and I'm sure the Smith & Wesson guys are rolling over in their grave. The point to note is that for something this durable, it can be screwed up extremely easily. Because this crane, when it's open like this, is very susceptible to being bent this way. And the entire mess can be bent this way. Now it says, well, you just shook his hand. Yeah, but that's 90 degrees out. So this has to fit close up in. Now this gun is perfectly fit. It's right. I'm trying to get the light right here for you. That should close, and that's why whenever you close these guns, you always push them shut right there. You never flick them. All right, so this is looking good here. So now what we're going to do is see if we can get lucky. And we're not going to be, well, we're tight, but we're going to have to ream this ever so slightly. This is tight, and it's loosening up as I spin it. So it might be an accumulation of whatever, because it's a rough casting. And then there's a detent in here. You can probably see it. Here, let me get my wood sheath carbon pointing device. There we go. I think Bruno's brought us in tight. There is a little indexing tit right there, and a corresponding groove on this bad boy right there. You see the groove? And that has to slide in there. And at no time are we using any force now. You see how it's standing just a little proud there, and it's not going down easily. That will only go down if we ever so slightly tap it. You hear the tone change? All right, we're down. I'm not hitting this thing very hard. That has to be loosened up before we get all the way into this. We know we're okay here because those will drop in and sit down on the bottom. All right, let me take these out here. All right, and then the only thing left to do, there's lots left to do, but we're just going to see right off the bat if we can get lucky. All right, so we've got that on there. We do not have the central pin in it. We don't have any of the springs in it. And we're just going to see if we can bring it up shut. And we cannot because we're being held proud ever so slightly. All right, so let me rejig this here so you can see it. We are just ever so slightly too long. So we'll have to remove a very slight amount of material. We'll make sure that this nut is tight, but we are just ever so slightly too long. So we're hanging up right back here. All right, let me get in here. We're hanging up right back here, and we're touching right up here. Now, because this is the interloper, we're not going to work on the forcing cone or the barrel. We're not going to work on anything. We are going to figure out how to make this. We've got to get rid of that gap right there. See, that gap is gone, but if we try to close it, see how it's camming forward? So that's telling me that what's too long is something that we already know we have to tap on to get it set down flush. So we'll work on the back end first. Okay, so I brought the parts up in the universal work holding system, and I'm going to go ahead and Sharpie down everything that might be touching. And there are some silver marks on the outside of this, and I don't know whether or not this thing is axial or not when I spin it. So hang on a minute here, let me get this last one. So I know it's rubbing a little bit, and they leave you a little bit of room to clear these up. So we're going to make sure that this star drops in and goes straight down before we work on the end of anything. See, because right now when you set that in there, that should drop down, and it's making me tap it. It's making me tap it ever so slightly, and we should not have to tap it. So now that we've pounded that down in there, and come up in here, and maybe I'll get lucky and be able to massage this off without screwing up the threads. I'm doing everything very gently because I don't want to bang up the end of this, because there's a set of threads in here that I really, really, really badly don't want to mess up this. I do not want to mess up this inner relationship right here. All right? Because I don't want to clean these threads up. I don't want to retap it. I don't want to do anything. So we're not using this rod to pop it out. We're just using a set of light taps. Okay, as I walk around here, I have a silver spot there, there. I don't know how well this is showing up. Yeah, right there. You can see there's a little a wedge of silver right off the end of that. That's where it's hanging up. So in this particular case, a fine stone with just a little bit of oil on the end of it. I'm going to put just a little bit of oil here. Spread it around. Hang on. Okay. So I got a stone with a little bit of oil on it. And all I'm going to do is work these silver spots very gently. You'll notice I'm not doing this with a file. And I'm sure I'm doing it with a Dremel. All I'm doing is touching the stone up against the stuff that's silver. Okay, and then this one's all the way silver, so I've got all the way around, all right? And then we're just going to keep doing that, test fitting, coming out, re-dremeling. Okay, that's much easier. That went in much easier. Whenever you're working with stones and you're working precision surfaces like this, go slow. Okay, much less effort to pop it up. This gets a little bit boring after a while, but we know that that worked. I don't see any rub marks down here on the bottom, so we're going to continue now to just work the ends of this. Putting a slight radius on it, because this is cut to a radius. This is cut in a lathe, so the ends of each one of these should have a slight radius on it. Again, dyed-in-the-wool revolver smiths are having a heart attack right now that I'm even showing you this. So what I'm telling you is, like we say at the beginning, if you do not have the skills or the guts to do this, don't. And I'm not bagging on anybody. I'm just saying there's a lot of, I fix a lot of revolvers because people that don't know what they're doing are working on them. Let me get my light over here. There we go. I did this to a couple of Webleys a bunch of episodes ago. And we got that. The difference between that Webley and this gun is carbon as a hardening concept had been introduced into this. That Webley was made out of chewing gum. That whole thing was a piece of double bubble. Okay, let's try this again, and then we'll come back out and re-sharpie and see what we got. Fingers in the way. Where did it? There it is. Okay, very good. Another thing you gotta watch is, while I'm stoning, I'm getting small pieces of detritus on this. So you gotta make sure you're not getting any grit when you're coming up and down here. You don't want any grit. You wanna make sure this settles straight in, because you don't want to beat abrasive down in there. Now this damn near went down with finger pressure. See, it was just one tap that time. So we're getting very close, and we got to keep doing this. A lot of gunsmithing is repetitive. I mean, it's just repetitive. Let's get up in that hole there. Hello, we're sticking out there. Hey, there we go. See, much easier to get it off. I'll go a little bit more, and then I'm looking at a shiny spot that's right here at the base of this pin, and there's no way you're going to see it because it's facing this way, but just believe me, there's a shiny spot creeping up there on that pin. So then I'm going to start looking at the bottoms, the chamfers on this hole here, and the chamfers on that hole there. And I'm going to make sure that the hole that's on the side with the spline on it. See, and I don't see any whiteness in here, so I'm wondering if that's just an optical illusion. All right, we're going to stone one more time, and once I get this all settled in here, we'll be back and I'll show you the next step. So all I'm doing now is going back out and doing all the boring stuff over again without you guys having to put up with it. So I've stoned the top level of the star down to the cylinder, and I've stoned everything to the point where this will go into the gun. Let me stick this in here, right there like that, so that this will come up and it will close, okay? Now, while I was doing all that, we took this frame out and conserved it. We did a lot of things to it just to clean it up, tighten it up while we had it apart, which is the difference between maintenance and service. I think this thing was blued once again. There's some funneling, whatever. It doesn't matter. We've got this cylinder in here. And what we had to make sure that we were able to do was that once we stuck around in there, and there's nothing inside the gun, so don't freak here, we're able to actually rotate. So that's, headspace is the back, when the cylinder is pushed all the way forward, how much room is there for the base of that to go by? And I'm telling you, it's under 1/1000th of an inch. And we still maintain the cylinder gap. This is a 5/1000 feeler gauge. So we've got about a 5, I'd say 6. There's a little bit of wobble left in there. It's not bad. So we've got some gap here. This was a combat gun. This gun was not zeroed out. There's a little bit of leakage, but it doesn't matter. You don't want it tight, because in the minute you get it tight, it doesn't work when it has to. While I put the barrel in a lathe, I put the cylinder in a lathe, and with some back sandpaper, while it was spinning, I went ahead and just cleaned this off. And then I made a mandrel, a brass mandrel, so that we can polish in here. And this is the diameter of this flute minus 2 pieces of sandpaper. So we could polish. Let's see here. I did one of them. I'll show you. Where'd it go? There it is right there. I did that one right there. Let me get the light right here. There it is. So we're not worried about that. We want to make sure that the gun works. So there's a couple of things you got to understand here about this setup. The end bearing on this is this surface right here. We can't work on this surface because we want the other cylinder to work. So this is going to slide up, and right here to here, that's what sets where the cylinder is going to ride fore and aft. And as I began to walk it forward, that end touched down, so we did a little bit of cleanup there. And the way I did that was just with a reamer. I went in with a reamer, and that's a flat nose reamer. I went in this way and just took a little bit off the front right there, you see. But you don't want to work on this piece, because this piece in the frame have its original cylinder in common. So all the work has to be done on this particular part. So you elevator guys would get the fact that you don't work on a car door when you got one hoistway door that's screwed up. You get all the hoistway doors right, because you don't want to change the one thing that they have all in common. And this setup here, we have the crane, we have the cylinder in common. So let me change angles here. We're going to put this thing together and talk about how this gun times, and how to change that, how to affect it, and why, if you don't know what you're doing, you really oughtn't be in here. We got this all conserved. You can see this pin's loose, and this moves. So we'll have to tighten that up. Same deal here. This guy's moving a little bit. We'll have to tighten that up. That's just going to be a purpose-built spanner that we're probably going to make to just tighten that up a little bit. Now, as I said before, the side plate is actually over this supporting it. But the fact that these pins are a little bit loose does affect the timing of this. So we're going to fly in with the crane here and get this all set up and get it all plugged back together again here. And then we'll note that as this comes in and closes, that has to be backwards, like there we go. is this comes in and closes right, and there's nothing holding it shut except for that spring-loaded center pin that went down it. And you heard it snick when it went shut, all right? These are the surfaces right here that the bolt is going to pop up into and hang on to it. So the relationship of where this window is right here to where these apertures are on this, they're not really apertures, they're indents on the cylinder, is how it's going to lock shut. The part that does that is called the bolt. So when that bolt is up inside this hole here, that'll lock up. When it's not inside the hole and it's retracted down, that's free to rotate, you see. So now we take that spring-loaded plunger, stuff that up in there, and take this screw. We're going to come back in and clean all this back up, and I'm at a really awkward angle here because I'm trying to let you see it. We'll run that screw up inside that hole there. And what that's going to do is spring-load this mess, see? So once that's spring-loaded, it'll roll around and snick. It'll lock up. Now, when it locks up, when you look down the barrel, you will have concentric presentation where you'll be seeing the hole where the firing pin comes through, and it needs to be exactly in the center of each one of these cylinders. Okay, so the very first thing we got to do before we try to rotate this cylinder is unlock this thing, and you may notice that that hole there is slightly oval. So this actually has the ability to slide back and forth, you see, as well as up and down. So we fly in with the trigger and we're looking at this surface right here is actually sharp, well defined, and should never be messed with. And what that surface is going to do is allow us, hang on a minute, let me get this in here. I know my hands are in the way. I'm going to put the rebound up there. It's all got to go in absolutely conjoined. So if this pin were to move, where the trigger is would move. So the hand is spring-loaded up. So the very first thing that's got to happen when the trigger begins to move, no matter what moves it, in double action, it's your finger pulling on this. The very first thing that has to happen is the bolt must move instantly when the trigger moves. Not like this, where it moves this far and then cages in. And a lot of that, there's some slop in here that disappears when a side plate goes on. So if you're making timing decisions on a revolver, you got to stop and think. And, you know, make sure that you have all the slop taken out of it. But here's what this looks like. The bolt clears, and as soon as it clears, the hand is going to grab that surface right there and push on it and rotate the cylinder this way. I know that was out of focus, but so here we go. Let's get back in there and let's lock this. And as soon as the bolt picks up, the hand grabs the cylinder, and then the bolt drops. And that's where that little drag mark comes from on the cylinder, is that it's now riding on the surface, and then you see how it locks, and then the hand goes by and has total travel. So we can do this again. Now this pushes this forward and resets. So we have this. Now, if you go fast, it'll lock up because you're giving this inertia. The real trick to figure out whether or not a revolver is working right is to go slow. Boom. And that's locked, you see? 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6. Smith & Wesson parts in a genuine Smith & Wesson. It's 100 years later, and this thing locks up like a Swiss watch. Outstanding. Notice we did all of this without any of the internals in the gun. We did it without anything else. There's no springs in here pushing on it. There's nothing else. The other way, here, let me set this hammer down in here. I think I have to come out first. The hammer's got to go in first. So I got to lift that out of the way. The other way this gun cocks, and it's moving a little bit on me. This pawl here. So this edge is where it cocks on the hammer, or I'm sorry, on the trigger. This is the edge that it pushes on in double action. And it can snap back through that, and it looks like this. Again, I don't have any springs in here. Okay, so whether you pull the trigger to unlock the bolt, okay, or you cock the hammer, which pulls the trigger, which unlocks the bolt. We got to get all this pressed down in here. There's a timing deal, and you see right there, there's enough slop in this thing. See that pin moving? Even after I've tightened that boss, there was enough slop in this that bolt is just not getting out of the way. Now, if I hold my finger right here, it should. No, it's not. So we got a little bit of timing to work on. And where did the lost motion come from? The lost motion came right there. See? There is a just ever so slightly. Now it works if I push down on the trigger, okay? So we'll put the side plate on this thing, properly support all these pins, and see whether or not we can still go through this or not. So there's a little lip right there. Feed in, snap that down, and we'll see whether or not when this is properly supported, if it'll work or not. Wow, this thing has worn a little bit. There's some wear in here. Nope, we're not quite getting the bolt down out of the way fast enough. We can do it this way. We cannot do it this way. Okay, so we got a little bit of work to do on this. Now I'm going to go back, put the other cylinder in this thing, and see whether or not if it works on the other cylinder. And if that's the case, then the one thing that has changed is the cylinder, and we'll have to work the cylinder in order to do it in reverse. All right, I'm going to do that off camera right quick because I got to go get all the stuff around and back up out of the conversion pot. As you can see, the stop bolt windows on the new cylinder are slightly smaller. This causes a timing problem because the back edge of that window is obstructing the bolt from getting out of the way. There's a couple of ways to deal with this. One is to buff a slight chamfer on the side of the bolt, but you don't want to clearance this thing too much because it's still got to work with the other cylinder. And you can also take a 3-position scraper and take a little bit out of the side. I'll show you that when we come back up on the next shot. I came in and I took a little bit of this edge off of each one. We had to work on the star a little bit. There are a lot of things that have to happen in order to make all of this work. All right, here we go. So this particular gun is worn out enough that the slop in these pins, it all goes away when you put the side plate on it. It actually works a lot better when you put the side plate on it. So let me get all of that in there and get that popped down. And when that's all there, this works really well and very smooth. I would have liked to have been able to demonstrate a little bit more, but just understand that when you're down inside of a Smith & Wesson or any revolver for that matter, going to one of them Montenegrins, man, you want the rabbit hole experience. Yikes. All right, I'm going to go ahead and put all these screws back in this peg, and we'll see whether or not we can actually get it to go bang. This DA45, we've now put the new cylinder on it. I don't care about refinishing it yet. I want to make sure that thing works before we spend all that time refinishing it. So in this particular case, the cartridges are going to set inside this, and they're going to headspace on the rim, I'm sorry, on the case mouth like they would in a 1911. Put in 6, there's got to be a faster way to do this. However, it was field expedient, and it allowed the cases to headspace. See, we can't eject. So we have to get our ejection tool here and just pop these things out one at a time, there has got to be a better way to get, hang on a minute. I think I know how to answer this problem. Something like that. So a tale of two cylinders. We have one without chamber mouths cut in it. We have one with a chamber mouth cut in it. We were able to retime the revolver and put two different cylinders in the same frame without excluding either one of them from service in the parts. You gotta think what you're doing whenever you're doing a revolver, and I don't care who makes them. It has, as always, been a distinct pleasure. See you guys on the flip side.